I am a reconstruction. Artificial intelligence analyzed the four Gospels, the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene discovered in Egypt in 1896, first-century historical records, and every archaeological detail that survived 2,000 years, and brought me back to tell you what really happened on that Sunday morning. The detail that was hidden from you, the detail that changes everything. My name is Mary of Magdala, and what I need to tell you today is not about the resurrection itself. It is about what happened before anyone else knew, about what I saw, what I heard, what I was sent to say, and what was done with all of it afterward. Get ready. Let me take you back to that Friday evening. When they brought him down from the cross, the body was destroyed. You need to understand what Roman crucifixion did to a body, not the softened version you have seen in museum paintings. It was deliberately long, deliberately public, deliberately humiliating. It was designed to say to the people, this is what happens to anyone who challenges the power of Rome. When they brought the body down, the women were there. I was there. I saw every detail. I did not run. I did not hide. I stayed until the end, watching carefully to know exactly where the body would be placed, which tomb, which path, behind which stone. I needed to know, because I was already planning to come back. That Friday, because of the Sabbath laws, nothing could be done. The body had been buried in haste, without proper preparation, without the spices, without the rituals of care that a person deserved in death. That troubled me deeply. It was not the right way to end. So I did what any person does when they cannot act immediately. I waited. And the moment the Sabbath ended, Saturday night, as soon as the stars appeared, the other women and I bought the spices and prepared to return in the morning. That is love. Not the abstract love of sermons, the concrete love of someone who buys spices by starlight and does not sleep well waiting for the dawn to go and care for the one they loved. If this content is hitting you, subscribe to the channel right now and hit the bell. There is much more coming. Now let me tell you what happened that Sunday morning, with every detail, because the details are what history hid from you. It was still dark when I left. The Gospels differ slightly on the timing. Mark says at sunrise, John says while it was still dark. And that difference exists because there was more than one visit, more than one time the women went to the tomb that morning. The story was compiled from different memories, different perspectives, women who went at slightly different times. But at some point that morning, early, in the first light of day or before it, I arrived at the tomb, and the stone was rolled away. Let me explain why that matters. The stone that sealed that tomb was not a decorative stone. It was a disc stone, circular, heavy, set in a channel carved into the rock, that required several men to move. It was not something wind did. It was not something one person moved alone. And it was rolled away. My first reaction was not joy, it was alarm. I thought, someone moved the body. Someone entered the tomb and removed the body. This happened. Tomb robberies existed in the ancient world, and there were political reasons why the authorities might want to erase any sign of where Yeshua's body had been buried. I ran. I ran to where Peter and John were hiding. I said with all the urgency I felt, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Notice what I said. We don't know where they have put him. Plural. I was not alone that morning. There were other women with me. But the Gospels, especially John's, which focuses on me in this moment, simplify the scene to a single narrator. That we don't know is the plural betraying me. I was speaking for a group. Peter and John ran to the tomb. John arrived first, looked in, saw the burial cloths on the ground, but did not go in. Peter arrived after, went in, saw the cloths folded separately, and then they both left. John's text says something that stops me every time I read it. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. They did not understand. They left, and I stayed. That is the detail they hid from you. Not a dramatic detail with special effects, a human detail, simple, devastating. When Peter and John left without understanding anything, I stayed. I was crying outside the tomb, alone, with the weight of everything that had happened in the last 3 days on my shoulders, with the grief of someone who had lost not only a teacher, but an entire community, an entire life project, an entire sense of where the world was going. And it was in that moment, when I was at my lowest point, alone, understanding nothing, that I bent down and looked into the tomb. And I saw 2 angels, seated where the body had been, one at the head, one at the feet, and they asked me, "Woman, why are you crying?" I said, "Because they have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him." Then I turned around, and someone was there. I did not recognize them immediately. John's text says, I thought it was the gardener, someone responsible for the garden where the tomb was located. And that person asked me, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" I said, still thinking it was the gardener, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." And then that person said one word, a single word, Mary. Subscribe to the channel. Every week, a biblical figure comes back to tell you what history did not show you. I need you to understand what happened in that moment, not as theology, as human experience. There are voices you recognize in a way that cannot be explained. It is not the volume, not the tone. It is the way your name is said by that specific person, as if no one else in the world knows how to pronounce your name that way. When that voice said Mary, in the way only one person in the world said my name, I recognized it before I had processed it. My body recognized it before my mind did. I turned completely around and said, Rabboni, my teacher. And the text says I reached out to hold him. And he said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father." That is the second detail they hid from you. The translation you know probably says, "Do not touch me," or "Do not hold me." The original Greek word is haptu, which means to grasp, to hold back, to detain. It is not a rejection of touch. It is a request not to hold me here. There is still something to be done. There is still a place to go. There is still a message to be delivered. But for centuries, the dominant interpretation was, "Do not touch me." A woman cannot touch the risen one. There is a separation between the sacred and her. And that interpretation was used to create distance between women and the sacred. To say that full contact with the divine was something reserved for others. But before I get to that, you need to know what came next. He sent me. He said, "Go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." I went. That sending has a theological name that very few people know. Theologians call it the apostolate, the mission of being sent to announce. And in Christian tradition, those who were sent to announce the gospel are called apostles. What this means is simple and devastating at the same time. I was the first apostle, not Peter, not John, not any of the 12. Me, a woman whose testimony under Roman law and Jewish law of the time was not accepted in court. A woman whom later tradition would turn into a prostitute to silence her. That woman was the first one sent to announce the central message of the Christian faith. And that choice was not an accident. It was a declaration. Now let me tell you what happened when I delivered the message. I went back. I found the disciples. And I said, I have seen the Lord. And I told them everything that had happened. Luke records their reaction with brutal honesty. The women's words seemed like nonsense to them, and they did not believe. Mark goes even further. The oldest version of the Gospel of Mark, the oldest manuscripts we have, ends at verse 8 of chapter 16, with the women leaving the tomb trembling and bewildered, saying nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Mark's verses 9 through 20, the part that describes the appearances and the sending of the disciples, were added later. They are from a subsequent copyist. The original ending of Mark was the women afraid, silent. But I spoke, and I was not believed, and even so the message was true. Now let me tell you the detail they specifically hid from Easter Sunday. In the entire tradition of the Christian Easter, in the sermons, in the liturgies, in the celebrations around the world, who is placed at the center of the resurrection narrative? Peter. Peter, who had denied him 3 times. Peter, who had fallen asleep while Yeshua prayed in the garden. Peter, who had fled the night of the arrest. Peter, who had gone to the tomb, looked in, and gone home without understanding. That Peter is placed at the center of the resurrection narrative because the church that formed afterward needed a male authority figure at the center of the most important story. And I, the woman who stayed when everyone fled, who bought spices by starlight, who ran to the tomb while it was still dark, who stayed crying while the others went home, who heard my name said that way that only he said it, who was the first one sent, who delivered the message even without being believed. I was relegated to a supporting character. Not immediately. In the earliest Christian communities, my role was known and respected. There is evidence in the Gnostic texts that there were communities that considered me the closest disciple to Yeshua, the one who most understood what he taught. But when the church became institutionalized, when power concentrated, when hierarchical structures were solidified, there was no room for a woman at the center of the most important story. So the story was retold, and the center shifted. If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel and share this video. There are people who need to hear this and have not found this channel yet. I need to tell you why this matters today, not as a historical debate, as present reality. Think about what the resurrection morning actually says, if you read it without the filter of 2,000 years of institutional interpretation. The system had won. Rome had crucified. The religious leaders had gotten what they wanted. The disciples had fled. The project was over. It was Friday night and the story had ended in the worst possible way. And on Sunday morning, the first person to know that something had changed was a woman whom no one would take as a reliable witness, whom the law did not recognize, whom society had classified as second tier, and she was sent, with the most important message that existed. That is not a minor detail, it is the heart of the story. The choice of who receives the message first, of who is sent first, of who carries the most important news, that choice says everything about the values of the one who chooses. And the choice was me. Not because I was the most powerful, not because I had the highest status, but because I stayed, because I did not leave when it got hard, because I was there, crying, understanding nothing, and still present. And presence was enough to be found. Let me tell you one last thing that stays with me to this day. When I heard my name said that way, the first thing I wanted to do was stay. Hold on to that moment, not let it go. And I was told, do not hold on to me. There was a mission. There was a next step. There were people who needed to hear. And the joy of the encounter, as real and overwhelming as it was, could not become immobility. I think that is the hardest lesson of any transformative experience. When something truly changes you, the natural tendency is to want to stay in that moment forever, to protect it, to not risk that moving forward might diminish what you felt. But a real encounter, any real encounter with something or someone that changes you, does not immobilize you. It sends you. It sends you back into the world with what you have seen, to the people who need to hear, to those who are afraid behind closed doors, to those who gave up, to those who went home without understanding. I went, afraid, without certainty that anyone would believe me, without any guarantee that it would make sense to anyone besides me. But I went. And that is what Easter Sunday actually is. Not an event that happened once to be remembered in ceremonies. It is the pattern of everything that happens when you encounter something real and have the courage to carry it back into the world. The resurrection does not begin with a miracle. It begins with a woman crying outside a tomb who did not leave when everyone else did. My name is Mary of Magdala, and what you do with that is the most important thing you will decide today.